When you think of a full moon, what comes to mind? Maybe it's werewolves, vampires, and zombies. Maybe you feel inspired to write poetry, howl at the moon, or maybe go out dancing. Maybe, just maybe, you swear that your pets are up to no good. You know what else happens during a full moon? A lot of strange things in the natural world. You see, a full moon is 4 to 7 nights after the new moon, and it's when the moon is fully illuminated by reflected sunlight. And this brightness can be quite intense, about 7% of the intensity of daylight. And that's why many animals across the globe change their behavior when there's a full moon. But how exactly does the light from the moon affect their actions? It turns out there's a whole lot of ways. First off, let's talk about the obvious, light pollution. Well, technically, we shouldn't call it light pollution. When it comes to a full moon, it's more like light illumination. On a clear night with a full moon, the illumination on the ground is about 20 times greater than on a night without a moon. That might not sound like much since nighttime is still dark, but for animals who are used to the much, much darker nights, this is a big deal. In fact, the increased light can completely change an animal's perception of the time. For example, fireflies use light as a way to communicate. They flash their abdomens in specific patterns to attract mates. But these flashing patterns can be disrupted by the bright glow of a full moon. Under these conditions, fireflies tend to flash less, making them harder to spot by both potential mates and hungry predators. So instead of spending all night flashing, they wait until before or after the full moon to do their courtship displays. This isn't the only way that the extra light influences animal communication. Take owls, for example. These nocturnal predators rely on stealth to get close to their prey and surprise them. However, when there's a full moon, they aren't the only ones hunting. Their prey can see them coming. In response, rodents alter their vocalizations to warn others of the danger lurking nearby. As a result, the increased light of a full moon can actually reduce owl predation. That said, it's not all bad for owls. You see, although the light might make it harder to sneak up on prey, it also makes it easier to see prey. That's because eyes come in 2 basic types, those adapted for seeing in low light and those adapted for seeing in high light. Rodents have the first kind of eyes. Although they can't see as well in bright light, they can see much better in the dark than most other animals. Owls, on the other hand, have the second kind of eyes. They can't see well in the dark, but they can see really well in bright light. Now, you might think this would put owls at a disadvantage during a full moon, but it doesn't. See, yes, the moon makes it easier for rodents to see and therefore harder for owls to sneak up on them. But the moon also makes it easier for the owls to see the rodents. And it's the same story for lots of predator-prey pairs. The added light makes it easier for the predator to see its prey, but also makes it harder for the prey to sneak away. In fact, there are even animals that take advantage of the full moon to find a mate. Some of these animals wouldn't normally be active during a full moon, but they make exceptions to the rule if finding a partner is on the line. Take katydids, for example. These insects are most active during the last quarter of the moon cycle, right before the full moon, and they increase their calling rates under the intense moonlight. The males compete with each other to attract the attention of the females, who tend to be more active during this phase of the lunar cycle as well. The males who produce the loudest, longest calls are the most successful at attracting a mate. So during a full moon, they really go for it. But increased visibility isn't the only way that a full moon can affect animal behavior. It also messes with their biological clocks. You see, many animals have biological rhythms that are based on the phases of the moon. This means that things like feeding, movement, or mating happen more often at night than during the day, which is unusual for these animals. For example, fiddler crabs living in tidal marshes spend their days hiding in burrows to avoid daytime predators. But at night, they leave their burrows to feed and search for mates. Like many other nocturnal animals, their activity is tied to the lunar cycle, and according to one hypothesis, this is because of all that extra light. Over millions of years, species living under these conditions have evolved to be more active during full moons, so they can make the most of the extra light. Some species, though, don't become more active. Take Japanese quail, for example. Their internal clocks are controlled by a gene called clock. And during a full moon, the birds experience a spike in their hormone prolactin, which normally suppresses their reproductive system. This means that instead of becoming more active during a full moon, they actually become less active. It's a similar story for many land snails, who also become less active during a full moon. Normally, they're most active during the new moon, but the intense light can dehydrate them, forcing them to retreat into their shells and slow down their movements. This is why some people say that it's bad luck to walk under a ladder or break a mirror. If it's full moon and you're a snail, you don't want to be moving around too much. Otherwise, you might end up hurting yourself. Of course, not every animal responds to a full moon this way. There are plenty of species whose behavior stays the same no matter how bright the moon shines. For example, fruit flies show no change in their mating behavior under intense light. And in some cases, like for the red-sided garter snake, there isn't even any noticeable change in behavior during the new moon either. So it seems that it's not so much the darkness of a new moon or the brightness of a full moon that causes behavioral changes, but rather the change in light intensity between night and day. Overall, animals need to constantly assess the risks and benefits of their environment and adapt their behavior accordingly. And a full moon presents unique challenges and opportunities. So as long as there are animals around to notice, there will be creatures adapting to the lunar cycle. Even if you can't see them, critters like corals and tube worms respond to moonlight by altering their behavior. And that's thanks to tiny photoreceptors in their bodies. Corals open their tentacles to feed when there's a full moon, and tube worms extend their feathery feeding appendages at night. But these animals are hardly alone. Moonlight affects all kinds of marine life. Fish like the yellowtail bluefin tuna change the way that they swim at night depending on the amount of moonlight. Since the bright glow can make it harder for them to hide from predators, they tend to move less in the moonlight. Squid and shrimp respond to the bright lights by releasing a chemical alarm signal, which could be their way of advertising themselves to predators or confusing potential attackers. And that's not all. Even microscopic plankton adjust their behavior under moonlight. Bioluminescence, or the ability to create light, is a common trait among marine organisms. Some phytoplankton, the base of the ocean's food chain, increase their bioluminescence when there's a full moon. They usually emit light as a defense mechanism to confuse predators, but they only do this in response to moonlight. On the surface, it might seem weird that animals would evolve to respond to something as simple as moonlight. But remember, evolution isn't directional. It doesn't care whether traits are complicated or simple. In fact, responding to the moon might be just as important as responding to complex social cues. For instance, under normal circumstances, lobsters hide in crevices during the day to avoid being eaten. But during a full moon, they come out of their hiding holes more often to feed and compete with each other for food. That's because the risk of being eaten is lower than normal. This means that a full moon can turn nocturnal animals into diurnal animals, at least for a night. So why do animals behave differently during a full moon? To survive, animals have to make choices about when to eat, sleep, travel, and reproduce. And they have to make these decisions in environments that are constantly changing. That's why animals evolve to respond to ecological time cues like the phases of the moon. Although it seems odd to us that animals would respond to something as simple as moonlight, it's just another environmental factor that they have to consider. And just like the seasons, the weather, and the availability of food, animals adapt their behavior to make the most of the resources the moon provides. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for watching.